leaders know that this is important. So the Senate is thinking about proposing bills. They can start proposing bills now. The day after the election, they can start filing those bills. And some of those issues that involve higher education have to do with the faculty senate and tenure and very like DEI, some things like that to make sure those policies are being followed. Anyway, this is the meeting right now. It's going on right now live. And I wanted you just to see this example of legislative committees don't only meet during regular sessions. They can be called during the interim in between those sessions and hold hearings like they're doing for higher education at this very moment. So there's a lot of ways that interest groups, people representing different interests like the faculty at higher institutions of higher education, like some of the students who are there testifying to the committee about their transparency and trying to work with them on this DEI stuff. It's happening, all the time. And it's an important element of civic engagement and working with our representatives in order to make sure that our interests are being addressed at least. Even if we don't win, at least they're thinking about what we want to have happen. So I'm going to give y'all that example. All right, so let's go ahead and get started then. So new week, we are looking at interest groups in Texas. 13. Already seen this announcement. You are not going to have a lecture on Wednesday, so you're going to have some time to work on your reports. Okay. I'm going to get your action plans graded by next Monday, so I will give them to you then, so just hold off on writing that conclusion until you get my feedback on that. But please feel free to work on that report during our class time on Wednesday. All right. Then we have a reading quiz due at the end of the week. All right, so this week we are turning to interest groups. And if you recall, I talked about the first few weeks of this unit, we're going to be focusing on what kind of institutions? Linkage, thank you. And what is a linkage institution? Somebody on this side of the room, what does that mean?
Something that connects the people to the government.
Thank you. Something that connects the people to the government. Absolutely. Very good. So organized interest, our form of linkage institution connecting people to government, like you just saw an example of. Testifying before our legislative committees. That's one way. The thing is, forming interest groups is important as a form of linkage institutions. There are arguments for and against, which you read about in your book. But the thing is, it's part of being in a country that gives us freedoms to speak, think, and act within certain limitations. You can find the basics for interest groups protection in the First Amendment. And the First Amendment doesn't specifically say you have a right to associate, but it does suggest that, implies that, but what the First Amendment includes. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. So we have very broad parameters about what we can say. We hate speech. There's some limitations, yelling fire in a crowded theater, things like that. But in general, we get to speak what we want to speak. We get to say what we want to say about government. This is not the case in all countries, as you probably know. In many countries, you cannot say something negative about the government without fear of being thrown in jail, which we have experienced here in the United States during several eras. So we're not completely immune from that. Even though our First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press to print things about what you don't like about government, about what you'd like to see government do, the right of the people peaceably to assemble. We can get together and talk about it. We can get in meetings. We can organize. We can form groups in order to press government to pass policies or protect our interests through the policies they already have. And then finally, the last part of the First Amendment is to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Petition. Have something written up, sign it. Have hundreds or thousands of people sign with you. It is a petition, and you can submit it to government and say, hey, this many people want this to happen. And I was watching that hearing a little bit earlier today, and one of the students was saying they had submitted a petition with thousands of signatures on it and got no response from the chair of that committee. So she was holding him accountable for that, for not interacting. But it was their right to peacefully assemble, no riots, no revolutions, and have a petition that they give to the government. Redress of grievances. This is what we don't like about what you're doing right now. This is what we want you to do. So we have that freedom under the First Amendment. Interest groups are built into our Constitution. And of course, if you recall, in 1786, we had Shays' Rebellion, when an interest group, the farmers in the state of Massachusetts, got together, led by Daniel Shays, to stop foreclosure on their farms. They stopped government. So people were a little bit nervous about interest groups after that, understandably, because they could make government completely stop. Could they overthrow government? So when the Constitution was written, they didn't have the Bill of Rights, of course. But people were still worried about these groups being too strong and being able to take over government. So how many of y'all studied Federalist 10 in high school in your U.S. government or federal government class? None? Okay. So James Madison wrote Federalist number 10. And of course, he was also the author of 51, where he said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary, but experience has taught us the wisdom of precautions. So he understands human nature. And he understands that men and women alike have ideas and thoughts and preferences for what they want to see government do. And naturally, because some of them share the same kinds of thoughts or same kinds of ideologies, they're going to get together and become more powerful, find resources, efforts, etc. And people are a little bit worried about this because of Shays. But James Madison was arguing, okay, what are you going to do? People have the freedom to think how they want to think. We cannot tell them you have to think exactly like we want you to do. We cannot make people think a certain way. They have the right to think how they want to. Or we can say, no, you can't meet. And either one of those would take away the freedom that we were trying to protect. So in his analysis, Federalist number 10, he said, interest groups are going to happen. They're just part of the nature of human beings. We form groups in order to have solidarity, to be stronger together, and those different things. So James Madison said, we don't need to worry so much about them because we are a large republic. Now, if we're a smaller entity, that might be a concern, but we've got a large jurisdiction, a lot of land that we're covering, and we're growing as a country all the time. And because we are so large, there's going to be so many diverse interest groups fighting for policies that as they fight each other and they compete for government policies to benefit them, somehow the common good is going to come about. It's people who embody these interest groups. It's people. It's their interest, and they're promoting their interest. Sometimes they might win, sometimes they might lose. But we got to give them the freedom to organize and petition government for redress of grievances. James Madison did not like interest groups. It's a general rule. But what are you going to do? You got to figure out a system where you can have interest groups, but also you're not going to have them overthrow the government. So his answer was pluralism, if you've ever heard of that theory. Pluralism, groups compete, and in that competition, then you're going to have matters settled. And there's been some empirical evidence for pluralism, but it's very limited. Because when you have groups that are forming, fortunately, some groups have more resources than other groups, and this was in your reading, if you recall. So that's one of the challenges of interest groups. So if you get a public interest groups where people are trying to get government to reform, but they don't have a lot of money, but they just feel like government needs to address us and what we need. And then on the other side, competing against them would be some kind of corporate interest that has lots of money behind them. And who's going to have the advantage?
The money.
I'm sorry?
The corporate group with the money.
Absolutely, because they have more resources. They could outlast, outspend, outorganize,
Mhm.
right? So pluralism doesn't quite work. But neither does elitism, which is say the corporations are, in bed with the politicians and they're only making policies that benefit them.
Right.
There's not really that evidence either, because sometimes pluralism works, and sometimes those underdog groups actually do succeed. Sometimes with the corporate interest groups help, but they do. So there we are. These are some examples of different interest groups. Going to go ahead and look at this. From your reading, you know that organized interest primary goal, is it to win elections?
No, influence policy.
Yes, influence policies, absolutely. That is their primary goal, to influence policies. They're not running candidates. They want to help their candidate get elected, but their primary goal, influence policy to protect their interest. Y'all are familiar with the NRA, I imagine. It's in the news quite a bit, right? They are organized. People join, become members in order to promote their interest. They don't want government to make legislation that might interfere with what they feel like are their interests. So they organize and act to do that. Texas Farm Bureau, I know it's partly insurance, but it's also an interest group to protect the interest of farmers. Common Cause Texas, it's a government reform group that looks over what government is doing and holds them accountable for what they say they were going to do with this policy, making sure it's happening. In 2023, the Texas legislature had an amendment that was proposed, number 5. The proposed amendment was to give more money for research at Texas public universities. It passed. About 2/3 of the people who voted in that constitutional amendment election approved it. So now there are greater state funds to help us research as public universities. So that was a PAC. Remember PACs?
Mm-hmm.
What does PAC stand for?
Political Action Committee.
Excellent. The Political Action Committee, somebody on this side of the room. What is a Political Action Committee?
Just a committee that calls for action for what the government should do with like campaign funds and stuff
Yes, so what did you say? It's a committee that calls for action. What was this?
by the government through campaign funding.
That's the money component of that. Absolutely, they are. They are like accounts, and sometimes interest groups will form a PAC. Sometimes PACs are just independently organized by, maybe it's a leadership PAC from somebody in Congress. It could be the Republicans forming a PAC, a committee from the Republicans doing that. But it's a PAC, a political action committee, that is collecting funds. So they collect the funds, and the organizers of the PAC then determine, okay, how are we going to spend these funds? And so I imagine they spent the funds sending out mailers and circulars to encourage people to vote yes on that proposition. And they did. And so this PAC has been disbanded since because it achieved its purpose to get that proposition passed. We have a PAC that is working for us in Washington, D.C., the Texas A&M PAC. So there are websites where you can go and look at how much money they have. So the A&M Political Action Committee, cash on hand, $167,000, contributions $1.7 million. So it's interesting to see this PAC for our interest as a university system.
What do they do? Like, just try to get money for the universities? Like, I just A&M, I just think like a college.
Yeah, I know. Well, see, okay, top payees, Lilly and Company is a lobbying organization. So they're
Mhm.
paying lobbyists to go.
Okay, but what are they paying the lobbyists to like do for them?
Well, for federal legislation,
Okay.
maybe things like NSF is a foundation that is funded by the federal government
Mhm.
that provides a lot of grant funding for universities.
Mhm.
They've recently cut NSF funding, so I
Okay.
can imagine they're trying to,
Get more. Okay, yeah.
yeah, things like that. So that's just one example
Yeah.
of, legislation that would help them. So Dennis Bonin, our Texas House Speaker previously, and Jay Nelson, Secretary of State, so helping them. Greg Abbott, was giving money to him. So, yeah, you can see in the people who are contributing, they list those. They have a bunch of money that they've
The money
contributed.
that they give to like people, is that like go in their pockets or like where does it go?
Well, to their campaign
To their
committees usually.
campaign? Okay.
Yeah. If they're a PAC. Now, a PAC can choose to contribute to the campaign like this,
Mhm.
or they can choose to have independent expenditures, where they're
Mhm.
just spending and making those commercials that we saw that are not
Mhm.
aligned with the campaign at all. So those are things that PACs can do. So we have them, I mean, they're everywhere, they're out there trying to influence policies. So organized interest in the political process, types of interest groups. I thought your book does a pretty good job of saying there are two main types of interest groups. Economic benefits or not. So that was good. Business economic, there's a few examples, AT&T, chambers of commerce in different cities. Labor unions are looking for economic benefits, better pay, better wages, all that. Professional associations, Texas Medical Association, Texas Bar, helping these professions get policy protection from the government. Trade associations, examples of those. Public interest groups are interest groups that represent a public interest as they define it. So what would the people be interested in? And as mentioned, Common Cause is an organization that was originally founded to hold government accountable, to do what it says it's going to do. Common Cause Texas recently has done things like they have told news media outlets when Texas commissions and boards are meeting in tiny rooms that are the size of a closet where the press corps cannot get in and report on what they're doing. So they do stuff like that, just to try to make sure government's doing what it's supposed to, the Open Meetings Act. We have the Texas Conservative Coalition Research Institute that also is holding government accountable through their research. Single issue groups, NARAL, we talked about that last week, National Abortion Rights Action League, Autism Speaks, there's NRA could be up there too in a way, but NRA has a lot of stuff. And this is intergovernmental lobbyists. So this is something to be aware of. How do we get funding for the Dallas ISD? Or how does the Dallas ISD get its funding?
Property taxes?
Property tax?
Precisely, exactly. They're using property taxes to hire a lobbyist to go talk to the state legislature to promote their interest. So there has been some question, should we have a law that prohibits using our property taxes in order to pay a lobbyist to go down and lobby the state legislature? It hasn't passed yet, but it's a question that people don't know about a lot of times.
What kind of things are they lobbying for?
Oh, more money, I'm sure. So, clarity of legislation, like special education, there's been some issues with what's going on in special education classrooms. So they could try to promote state policies to define what they need to do, to make it clear. Do something like the critical race theory in books and stuff like that. Yeah, so they're lobbying, they're trying to influence government.
I'm sorry, I know you said it. What was the last point down there?
Intergovernmental, so it's between governments. So Dallas ISD, what kind of government is that?
Public?
Local.
Local.
Us, yeah. Special district.
It's a special district, precisely, good. And Texas A&M University system?
But, like,
Well, we're publicly funded, right? We get state funds. So we,
yeah.
yeah, are petitioning the state government because they send us money. Huh? First one, this one? Public interest groups, yeah. So public is an interesting term because when you hear public interest group, you're thinking, huh. So it's all of us they're trying to do. Maybe something like clean air.
Was it the what was, I forgot what it was called, but it was like the Mothers Against Drunk Driving or
Yes.
something like that? That's public, right?
That is, that's a good example of a public cause, right? We
Okay.
want fewer drunk drivers on the roads. Yeah, that's one of those exceptions. It could be a single interest and publicly, yeah, there's, really good point.
But
There's
public
gonna be
is
overlap.
just like so long as they don't make money.
Right? Yeah. That's the exception, that's right.
Yeah,
They're not
okay.
after the money necessarily, they just want policy change. Yeah, that's a good point. PTAs and things.
Okay.
Okay, good, good.
I was gonna say, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving,
Uh-huh.
like leader, her son died in a drunk driving accident 21 years ago. I met that dude this weekend.
Oh, my goodness. Incredible, well, wow. So were you at a function or interest groups or?
I was at a prison.
Goodness.
He gets out next week. He's been there for 21 years.
Wait, why were you out of prison?
Real.
I'm nosy.
Like church stuff.
Oh, okay.
But
That's
I met
remarkable.
that dude.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is kind of cool, actually.
He's
Yes.
like super religious now.
Well, what a coincidence that you just said. Oh my goodness. Whoa, you're just blowing my truck.
Everyone's like,
Or there's that movie, I can't remember the name of the movie that I watched, it's about the founding of, yeah. All right. So, talked about elitism, where people with money have more of a say in policy making than people without money. And if you remember, I talked about one of the factions within the Democratic Party is the Service Employees International Union that represents like hotel maids and people who don't usually have representation. You can think that is something unique because the SEIU is representing a whole bunch of people, whereas major hotel chains are very few. Makes sense? Hilton's, what else out there? I don't know, they're all conglomerated, it seems like.
The Holiday Inn.
Holiday. Marriott, I don't know.
The
Anyway,
Quinta.
let me do a better example.
They're all a part of the IHG program.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. That's my point.
I know my mom has like a credit card with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Good
She
benefits.
uses them.
So, okay, I have two, airlines or healthcare. Now let's just say healthcare insurance companies. There's some really major insurance companies in the state of Texas, right? Can you give me name of one?
State Farm.
Blue Cross Blue Shield. Is State Farm for health insurance?
Oh wait, no.
No.
Okay.
We don't know.
They do my car. I didn't know they did. So, okay, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Any
That's all we
other?
got. I have no idea. We don't have health insurance.
Anita?
What?
Actually,
That's the one I did.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Right, that's huge,
Blue
right?
Cross Blue Shield
Okay,
is it?
I
so
don't have it 'cause it's a scheme.
Blue Cross Blue Shield and maybe a few others.
Wait, is this
We
Blue
don't
Cross
know.
Blue Shield?
Think about how many people use
I don't
healthcare.
know.
Oh wait, yeah, it's called Blue Cross.
How many people use healthcare? A lot. Which has more power, the people or the insurance?
The insurance.
The insurance.
Yes, why do you say that?
It is a scam.
Yeah,
Do you know how much they
But-
mark it up?
Oh, for sure.
but it's so expensive if you don't have it.
It is
It's not that.
so expensive, right?
But it is.
So expensive to have it.
Yeah.
Olivia?
Well, they're kind of like the deciding factor on like what you feel like you can go and do in your
They are.
for healthcare.
Which is scary because like
Yeah.
if they're telling you you can only go to these doctors
Yeah.
or like especially if you're switching jobs because some jobs like they give health insurance, right? And it's like let's say you've been going to this doctor for like your entire life and then all of a sudden you switch jobs and now you're not allowed to go to that doctor.
Mhm.
That's scary.
It's so scary. Not even you have to switch jobs. Here, we have an issue with Blue Cross Blue Shield at this university. And I almost had to not see my doctor anymore that I've seen for decades, like you're saying.
It's crazy.
It is. Then they have that power. Whoa. Okay, so
Screw
Yes.
me.
Just a fun fact. Did you know insurance companies get their own insurance? I just know because my aunt's friend sells insurance to insurance
Oh,
companies.
that is hysterical.
Because they have to, like, I don't know why. It's really interesting.
Yes.
You'd think they have enough money to pay it
Yeah.
out, but
Yes. Well, and yeah, on the other side of that is you want a really good investment, probably the insurance corporation. So, Manker Olson was an economist who looked at organizing and collective action. Collective action is people getting together and getting in groups. So he wrote about this phenomenon that he was seeing. This is around the 1950s when rational choice was really becoming a strong theoretical orientation. People are rational actors. They're going to do what's the most utilitarian for themselves, i.e. they get the biggest bang for their buck. So it's a theory that still holds some power in the social sciences, that people are rational actors, although there's some limits to that. But anyway, one of the examples you can use for this collective action problem is when you have a good or service that's publicly funded. Well, I'm going to say Tarleton Radio, KTRL. I like to listen to that radio. Your fees pay for that station. They also ask for donations, I believe, similar to other public radio stations. Okay? I have never contributed. Y'all are, thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it. Because I get to listen. I'm a free rider. And I'm a free rider. I benefit from a publicly provided good or service, but I do not contribute to it. I know,
I
so
don't want
cheap.
them to use my money for that.
And I can turn it on, and then I know it will be there if I pay for it or not.
Good
That's a bad thing. So,
Being a free rider?
yeah, well, that's a normative statement. It is what it is. But being utilitarian, if I don't have to pay,
I'm gonna use it.
yeah, should I?
Might as well.
So Banker Olson, he noticed this and he wrote about it. And he said, okay, well, when we have a good or service that's being supplied and it benefits a lot of people, it's harder to get them organized than when just a few are involved in the benefit. So if you think about health care costs, insurance policy premiums, there are just a few insurers that set those standards, right? Those prices. So they have more of a say. And it's easier for them to get organized than it is to organize all these people who are listening to the public radio station and not paying. So when you have fewer individuals who are affected, you can overcome the collective action problem because you can see who is participating and who is not.
But can it also be a money thing?
It's totally right.
Because like the few who own the insurance agencies, they have a lot more money than,
Yep,
you know, so they have that power to influence.
absolutely, they do. If enough, but we all use healthcare to some extent, right?
And then they kind of have us like between a rock and a hard place because you have to use insurance for your health, but
Right.
like you may not like it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right, but we could organize.
Yeah, but we won't because we still need the insurance.
That's true. There is a link to a professor explaining about why the NRA is so powerful. It's in Canvas. I highly recommend you look at that because it's about a fraternity. And how, and sometimes in a fraternity, you've got the collective action problem going on. So why is it that sometimes a fraternity, a smaller fraternity, can get more things done than a larger fraternity? So it's not really a money thing even then. You're just saying like a frat has a party and they need to
Right.
clean up the house the next day. So if you have fewer members of the frat,
They're all
then
going to pitch in because they're only
Exactly.
never if you have 100 members, then might only have 3 pitch in.
that is the deal. Those people who are really, you know, dedicated, willing to get early. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you see, you know, your non-participation is going to be noticed and
You're
might
good.
affect. then
Yeah, you're going to do it.
Yeah, so that's the few defeat the many. And political scientists that I really like out at Northwest University. The flaw wrote, the flaw in the pluralist heaven is that the heavenly chorus sings with a strong upper class accent. Remember, pluralism was something that James Madison was suggesting in Federalist 10, that the groups are kind of compete and the public will be found by this competition and who wins. Well, no, that's kind of a sanguine, very positive way of looking at it, because upper class accent, people that have more money have more influence, just like you were saying. Okay, how are we going to get these people organized then to try to change policy? If you have a group with numerous potential members, offer them,
Solution?
oh gosh, it's not motivation, it is a benefit, but what is another word for it?
A bribe.
Yeah. Selective benefits, oh my gosh. Incentives. Incentives. So if you want to get a lot of gun owners together to help fund your lobbying at the state or federal level, how are you going to get those members to give you some money? To give you their resources, to share their resources, maybe to write letters to their legislators, etc.
I would
Monthly
make a
magazine.
propaganda piece say, oh, that works too. I was gonna say. I was gonna make a propaganda piece that like says that
Yes,
the government's gonna take
please.
all your guns and then they're gonna donate.
That helps. That helps. Or selective
Terrible,
benefits.
but-
If you join the NRA, you get choice. You might get a magazine that you couldn't get otherwise, right? Or expressive, so you get the cap that you can wear around, let people know you're a member of the NRA. And it also provides solidarity, like you're all working for something that matters to
And
you.
it makes you feel like you're part of a group.
Yes. So, yeah. Those can overcome the collective action problem and then make people join groups. The ARP, y'all know what that is? Okay. The largest interest group in the United States, I think I've told you, the building covers a block in Washington, D.C. How did they get to be so powerful? Well, they started out as a retired teachers interest group. And they got benefits like discounts for travel and restaurants and things like that for teachers who didn't make all that much money during their lifetimes. And it just grew, and people joined it, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and now it's this powerhouse by offering these selective expressive and solidarity benefits for people who are older. Also, I think it's interesting on this magazine from the NRA, it tells you, vote for these candidates. It tells you, it gives you information on which legislators are
That's
promoting
good.
them. I know, it's no, and in one of your reading quiz questions, it's like, okay, interest groups help people not have to keep informed as much. They provide information for them. Okay.
But is that information
It's the information
not
they want them
biased?
to hear.
Yes, that's right. Exactly, yours is
Not to
All right.
brag.
Strategies that interest groups use to influence policy. Number one is lobbying. Number one is lobbying. They lobby. So they either hire a lobbyist to work for the interest group if they're big enough, or they hire contract lobbyists to represent them. So insider lobbyists are out there connecting with our legislators or maybe their staff if the legislators are busy. They directly contact government officials. They give them information, model legislation. They buy them meals.
I feel
Remember,
like that's kind of shady.
right?
All of it.
Yes,
I mean, it's
Real.
business, but
that's what it
they're
is.
giving them information too.
Exactly. So yeah, watch that. I have another video in the supplemental optional reading that goes to a report about lobbyists. And you know, they buy football tickets for the legislators, take them to nice restaurants. I know, spa days and things like that.
Yeah.
They're limited in how much they can spend, but they pool their limited funds, and it makes a nice little package. I wanted to show you just this list of lobbyists.
Football tickets.
So the Texas Ethics Commission requires lobbyists to register and to report on who has hired them, okay, and who they're representing. And yeah, sometimes funding. And there's the funding categories that they have to report. Now, hopefully this will work. An acquaintance of mine in Fort Worth is a lobbyist, Bill Miller.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
you can see Bill Miller represents 24 different clients when he is lobbying the Texas legislature. One of them, look there, Cross Blue Shield.
Mm.
He also represents the city of Arlington, the city of Pasadena. Sometimes, oh, there he is. Cullen, Texas Health. Dallas Police and Fire Pension System. I looked at pensions before. So he's protecting those interests. Oil Company, Harris County Department of Education, Harris County District Attorney's Office,
Oh my goodness.
and it's a lot.
He does a lot, yeah.
Houston Astros. What, sorry?
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that
Houston
cool?
Astros.
I didn't know that until I saw it
Let's
on
see a
this
little
list.
bit
So,
forward.
and, yeah. Lobbyist. Oops. So, outsider lobbyists are when citizens mobilize to attract attention and influence government officials. So, outsider lobbyists or grassroots lobbyists, you could say, they're from the people taking action, they're trying to get attention of the media and political officials. So they will protest. But the thing is, you can't have a protest and no one show up, because what's the point? You gotta get people to come out and have signs, and the goal is to get items to move from the public agenda, right? There's a group of people who really care about this matter, Black Lives Matter, for example, and then where do they want it to go? Move from the public agenda to the
National agenda.
national or
Government.
state government, yes. So how I phrased it a few weeks ago, political agenda, right? And you want the politicians to look at it, to do something about it. And they did. After Black Lives Matter protests, they paid attention. They were going on everywhere. They were spreading through social media. People were meeting in our city park and across the state for protests. It caught media attention. And our government officials were influenced to look at the matter, and they did pass legislation in the next legislative session. So they lobby. And the main currency that a lobbyist has is information. That's the thing that the political officials want, that a lobbyist representing an interest group can offer. So lobbyists educate political officials and the public about favored policies. They dispense political research to say, this is the impact of this policy, this is how it will help us, this is how it will hurt us, please do not pass it. So it is the thing that they can offer political officials, the political officials want. Also, lobbyists provide model legislation, resources, hey, I'll take you out to lunch. Public support, they can tell the interest group members who to vote for. So you work with us, what's your name out there as you're supporting us. But of course, in the reading, I think it was good to point out, lobbyists don't just go to anybody and talk about what they want to see happen, right? They go where? Which legislators do they tend to focus on? Somebody in this third row. Yeah.
People, or my brand, it's like the people who don't have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Exactly. Their constituents aren't looking at them to see which way they vote necessarily. It's just one of those matters that they could have some influence on. Good. So look at these two examples. This is Common Cause Texas testifying before the Texas House Committee to oppose a bill that would enable election judges to carry firearms. Yeah.
What was the second blank on the last slide?
What was the second?
Oh, outside.
Thank you. So what kind of lobbying is this,
Outside.
insider or outsider? testifying before a committee in the legislature? Insider lobbying or outsider lobbying?
Inside.
It's inside, right? Because you're talking to the legislators directly. Good. All right. There was a study done that said, you know what? Broadband infrastructure is complete in our state. And so the legislature wasn't going to worry about broadband infrastructure so much. But oh no. So the Deep East Texas Council of Governments, these counties, got together and they circulated a petition where people signed against that map that showed broadband was available in their area. They didn't have it. Somehow the map got it wrong. And they were telling legislators that they didn't need to worry about broadband access in this part of the state. So they got together, had a petition to present it to the officials. Now what kind of lobbying is that? Inside or outside? Outside, very good. Right, to get the people organized to promote that influence. All right. Organized interest in the political process, public officials, and lobbyists. So what is the revolving door? Somebody on this side of the room. I'm going back to you guys. How about the back row? What is the revolving door?
It's people that were public officials then become a lobbyist.
Yes. Because if you think about it, how much is a legislator paid? Remember?
Like 7,000 plus something else.
Yep, 7,200.
Oh,
That's it. Very good, very close.
Plus per diem pay, isn't it?
They do have the per diem pay, which can add up, especially if they have special sessions. Yeah, true that. But they don't make nearly what a good lobbyist can make, right? Because these lobbyists are representing moneyed interest many times. So I want to show you this website, 10 top lobbyists in Texas.
8 million?
Yeah,
It's a nice job.
yeah. And look what they did before. Former chief of staff to Governor Greg Abbott. Revolving door. I think so. Andrea McWilliams. Capitol chief of staff by 21. They don't say for who, but she has insider knowledge too. One thing I wanted to notice too, this top guy, he is not, currently has no taxpayer-funded contracts. Remember, like the Dallas ISD, he's not using that kind of tax money. Andrea, 20% of her clients are taxpayer-funded.
So like even if you maybe don't support what she's supporting, your money's still going to her? Oh,
Bruh.
Yeah.
I mean, good for her.
Exactly. Number 3, he spent many sessions as a Capitol staffer. So, yep.
Are number 2 and 3 married?
Oh, I don't know.
Because
Dang.
that's got to be some kind of.
Wait, I'll look it up. I'll
I'm
look
not
it
gonna
up.
see
their house.
Yeah, no for
Dual-
me.
dual income family, I guess.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's with the other half.
Yeah, so there's part 2.
What?
Oh, the other half of McWilliams Governmental Affairs Consultants.
I want to see their
Huh.
house.
Oh, they are. Indeed married.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, I
I want to see their house.
Giving Ma Pa Ferguson.
Why can't I look up their house?
So if you go down the list, almost all of them formerly worked for government officials or the committees, yes, somewhere in the legislative body. So I don't know, we have those interns positions that we offer Charlton students. We have Charlton students going down to state ledge for this legislative session. So have that available if you're ever interested in doing that. A revolving door. And sometimes 2 lobbyists will run for office and get elected. So that's the other half of the revolving door, which is they have the connections. They have the support. People will endorse them. Easier for them to win. Okay, organized interest also, or in the political process with what kind of triangles? It's a metal. Iron strong. Strong symbiotic relationship among these 3 vertices of the iron triangle. So there's an example up there. There's one in your book too. but this is for the Texas Senate and House committees and subcommittees on higher education. We saw them at work earlier. They hear testimonies, they get budget requests from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. It's part of the executive branch, so that's another part. So they request funding from these committees because the legislature's in charge of the budget. So they're asking them for funding. And they're also reporting to the legislature what good they're doing, what their plan is, 60 by 30 Texas plan that they have. And they're reporting to the committees about their progress on that and how Texas higher education is doing. Well, the third part is the interest group side. The Texas Coalition for Excellence in Higher Education is an interest group that testifies from the legislative committee, works with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. They're providing information about what's going on among institutions of higher education. So they, again, information is the main currency in trade here that they provide the legislative committee and the Higher Education Coordinating Board. And so as they work together, it forms this relationship where they're all advantaging each other. And so whatever the Texas Coalition for Excellence in Higher Education wants to do, then that's likely to put into legislation and then implemented by the executive agency. If there's something that the legislative committees want to do, but they are not in favor of, and this is what happens most of the time, they don't want to see those changes being made, then they will lobby to stop that from being passed. So it's just, they all work together on the Iron Triangle. Iron Triangles, they don't have to exist. They're operating all the time. But they can be limited by when the governor says it's going to veto whatever legislation they're working on.
What are they called? Arms triangles?
Iron, I-R-O-N. Or perhaps what they're trying to do, a law they're trying to implement is deemed to be unconstitutional, and y'all read that in the chapter. Okay, so number one strategy of interest groups when they're trying to influence policy is lobbying. Precisely, we have insider and outsider lobbying. A second strategy is filing lawsuits and briefs in support of an interest. So what is that?
Suing? Wait.
They're suing.
Litigation.
Litigation.
Oh, yeah.
More general terms, litigation. Filing lawsuits and briefs in support of an interest. The League of United Latin American Communities. So anyway, it's Latin American, that interest group sued about the segregated schools that we had in our state. And they won that lawsuit in like 1946, even before Brown v. Board. So LULAC successfully desegregated Texas schools the decade before that Brown v. Board occurred. The thing was, this was something that was not going to get passed by majoritarian processes. School boards or in the Texas legislature, trying to desegregate schools was politically unpopular in the state. And they knew that trying to get it to pass through legislation would not work. Around the same time, this is when Truman was president, and he was desegregating our troops, and that was unpopular for some places in our country. It was also when the NAACP was working on desegregating schools through lawsuits because they knew that Congress had control by the Southern Democrats, so especially the Senate. A lot of power was with them, the Southern Democrats, who wouldn't support desegregation. So they used lawsuits in order to achieve that. So interest groups do that. They can always sue if the other means are not working for them. Mobilization is organizing citizens to participate politically.
What was that again?
Mobilization, mobilizing people. It's important to have a structure, somebody to do the organizing, right? It's easy to have social media, hey, let's meet up in City Park and have this protest, but what happens the next day? Are you organized in order to present these policy ideas to the legislatures? No, exactly. So that's an important contribution that interest groups make, is they have a structure. They have people who are willing to take leadership roles and get people down there. So this is an image of Tarleton Texans at the state capitol during lobby day. I don't know if y'all know Dr. Morrow, Dr. Cogley in my department, they're there in that image. They were there as well as many students were bussed down there in order to go talk to our legislators. And it wouldn't have happened unless somebody organized it and got the buses together, distributed the information, got people to sign up to do it. You know, interest groups facilitate that. So we have lobbying. What's the next one?
Litigation.
Litigation. What's the next one? Mobilization. And then the fourth, electioneering. So interest groups support election campaigns, obviously by saying these are the people that vote the way we like them to. That's one way. But of course, they also make contributions to campaigns to help their favorite candidates get elected.
Yeah, electioneering. Electioneering.
They can make independent expenditures. So in 2010, United States Supreme Court made a decision in Citizens United versus FEC that said spending money is a form of political speech, so you cannot limit it. Political speech is a fundamental right protected under that First Amendment. So if you're an organization, if you're a person, and you want to spend $100 million to help somebody get elected, you have that right. But if it's a federal candidate, you have to do it independently. And here in the state, we don't have limitations on how much money you can contribute unless it's a judicial candidate. But for federal candidates like Senator Cruz, you have limits on how much you can give to his campaign. So it's more effective to raise a lot of money and spend it independently. This link goes to Open Secrets that we've looked at before with Allred and Cruz. So you can see this is outside spending, this is not their campaigns. So you think about all those commercials we were seeing last week. Look at this. People or groups supporting Colin Allred spent $11.6 million on ads or however they spent it in order to support his election. People opposing him spent $32.4 million.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, oh dang, that's right. Ted Cruz, people who were lobbying in support of him, or making commercials, etc. $8.5 million were spent. Those in opposition to him is $2.7 million were spent. It's huge.
Imagine being so much of a hater that you spent $32 million.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's
I know.
absurd.
And then you can scroll down and see what groups.
That's crazy.
Truth and Courage PAC.
Win it back pack. I like the name of that one. Save our country pack.
Yeah. And look how much money they're spending. Look, that's $25 million spent.
Win Senate pack. They're creating.
There's like
They're
way better
I like
things
their
to
names.
spend this money on.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
It is. That's why we're seeing all those
I wonder how
commercials.
much they spend on one commercial.
Of course, they hire
I hate the commercials.
people to design
They're
them.
so
and make
bad.
them-
Yeah, I guess
They're
there's a
on
lot
like
that goes behind
Hulu
it.
all the time.
Oh, do they have to pay like the platform? Like if they run an ad on
Yeah,
Hulu,
they have to pay to
pay
have
the
it,
platform
yeah.
to run their ad.
Yeah.
Dude, Hulu is so bad.
Yeah.
Hulu's an ad like every 20 minutes. Like I just want to watch my show.
Okay, so that's independent expenditures. Again, PAC stands for
Political Action Committee.
Yes, thank you. Local action committees. Local action committees can be formed by interest groups. They often are as an arm. One interest group I did not cover on that first slide. We have Chevron up there. Chevron can be counted as an interest group. So these corporations hire lobbyists to represent their interest a lot of times, especially energy corporations. They have a lot of lobbyists working at the legislature to protect their interests. Those of y'all who've been in energy, y'all know. And I thought of this because last semester I had a student whose father works for BNSF. And BNSF in Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, they have a PAC. And the people who are employees of BNSF are kind of strong-armed a little bit to contribute to the PAC. They expect them to make those contributions, and they notice if they do or they don't. So, I don't know, I just thought that was interesting to hear, you know, that
It's good to
insider
know.
information
About it.
about these political
Yeah.
action committees.
It's about to.
So, they can be for corporations, they can be for public interest groups, they can be professional associations, etc. But it's just a funding vehicle, these PACs. Super PACs came about following that Citizens United decision, and then there's one other that's similar. Super PACs are only created to make independent expenditures. They're not going to give any money to a candidate's campaign. They're only spending it outside. Notice though, if it's a super PAC, they are required to list donors. PACs in general aren't required. Now here in Texas, if somebody gives you over $500, then you are required to list them. But you can just give them $499, and people don't know that you're giving to them. Okay. So as y'all read about, organized interests often have narrow focus, contrast to party coalitions. Business interests dominate in the interest group universe. Strategies to educate citizens and officials regarding favored policies. Try to get them,
What was the second one on the last slide?
okay.
Political action.
Okay, election. So again, information is its main currency that it has to offer. People who are interested in what they're doing, and also officials that need the information. They do not know about everything, so they need to rely on somebody to provide them with some research about what's going on in different issue areas, just like y'all are studying. There's probably interest groups. You did your opinions. Did you see some interest groups out there? For and against, maybe? What you're looking at? Hopefully you saw that, yeah, some interest groups out there. They lobby legislative and executive officials, of course. They litigate to achieve goals. And if they're not part of the lawsuit, remember a lawsuit has two parties, somebody versus somebody. If they're not one of those parties, they'll file a brief, an argument. And a correlation exists between the number of briefs that are filed and the likelihood of at least the Supreme Court looking at a case. So if interest groups are filing these briefs, it can make it more likely that they are heard at the highest levels. Interest groups mobilize citizens to participate. Why would they do that? Why do we need citizens to participate?
To get votes.
To get votes, okay? To get them to vote for the people that are promoting the policy the way they want it to be. What
Raise
else? This
money.
back corner, I haven't heard from y'all. You guys, were you gonna say something?
Raise money.
Raise money, absolutely.
Raise awareness, so
Raise
the
a-
politicians think that it's a big problem and not just one group.
Expand the conflict, right, it's good.
Maybe resolve the collective action
Yes.
problem.
Offer them something, right?
Yeah.
You come out to the park for our protest, we'll have donuts or something. Yeah, good.
Works.
Electioneer to help gain access to elected officials. Political scientists have looked to see, is there causation between giving a lot of money to a candidate's campaign and then the policies that come after that? We cannot find causation. There are too many other factors that go into the calculus of a legislator when they're deciding how to vote on a bill. But we do see there's certainly correlation between the more money you give to their campaign, the likely they are to answer the phone when you call. Most of us, like if I tried to call an elected official, I would get their staffer, and they'd be very nice, very friendly, very helpful. But chances are very slim I'd get to talk to the actual person who has the power, you know, because I'm not giving lots and lots of money. And also there's other reasons too, they're very busy. But if they're helping them get elected, that does help them gain access. We have found that's causation. So this influence of interest groups is enhanced by only having 140 days for legislative sessions, understaffing, and lack of party competition. So that opens up space for interest groups to exert more influence. Good or bad thing?
What's your question?
Oh, is that a good or bad thing, do you think?
It can be both.
Maybe both.
I mean, they're getting, because the interest groups are, I mean, they have a lot of money and all that, but they also are formed by people who like have an invested interest in that, so they're probably gonna have more information and do more research. And then the legislator who maybe does not care about the topic, and so then they can provide better information, but also the information could be biased because that is what, I mean, they're trying to influence policy.
Absolutely. So, yeah, good and bad. But like James Vanessa said, maybe better than the alternative.
We say we want less government, but I think that just gives more ability for them to be influenced by interest groups and
What a good point.
election committees.
Well, isn't it more the government that we want
Yes.
and not like the government that we don't want? That's
Yes.
the reason why they want less government, because it's not the government that they specifically want.
That's a good point. Yes. Yes, it can work both ways. Really good point. Thank you. Okay, so we're not gonna meet on Wednesday. I am gonna be reading your action plans. And y'all are gonna be working on your reports. Okay? And maybe watch a couple of those videos I have for you in campus. Pretty interesting. Great, okay. Thank you very much. I'll see you next week.